everybody. My name's Tisa Murdock. I'm a product line manager for end user computing at VMware. And today we're going to talk about the non-stop point of care desktop. And you know what's interesting in talking to a lot of people here at HIMSS, almost everybody's familiar with VMware and what we've done with server virtualization, but a lot of times when we talk to people, they're not familiar with our desktop virtualization. And by looking here, you can see that VMware has been actually the first to market with desktop virtualization going back to 1999 with our introduction of the workstation product. We've also were the first to introduce the server virtualization platform ESX in 2001. That's what we use to host our desktops. We came out in 2006 with VDI. We were the first vendor to bring the solution to market. In 2009, we transferred the PC over IP hardware to hardware protocol into software to software. Later this year, late last year, we introduced the first integrated offline-online VDI solution. And then you'll see us this year introduce what we're calling the non-stop clinical desktop. So what we're finding in the last few years in healthcare, there's been a lot of change and disruption in the industry, as you're all very familiar with. There's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions. People are heads down figuring out how to roll out electronic medical records, the certified version of electronic medical records, and get the end users to start using those systems so they can start qualifying and reaping the federal stimulus funds. You see healthcare having to deal with antiquated infrastructure, and now you have, it's just very hard. It's a very hard environment to work with. Now they have Windows 7 kind of looming on the horizon, so people are thinking, how am I going to upgrade all my desktops? And this is really causing people to rethink the way that they deliver desktops and applications. Because the old way of doing this, where you take a physical device, install an operating system, layer applications on top of that operating system, and then allow end users to save data and information to that device, is just too hard to manage, it's too expensive, it's not secure, and there's really low levels of service in this environment. So what we're also seeing is people make the move to electronic medical records, that it really increases the number of devices that they have out on the healthcare floor, which just makes sense. You're moving from pen and paper to electronics. But what we also know from doing research is that to manage these physical devices is really expensive. For every dollar it takes to acquire a PC, people typically spend $3 a year to manage that PC. So at this point, you really have to ask, is this old solution, the old way of delivering desktops and applications, is this the way to move forward? And if we look at the typical use case for the point-of-care desktop in healthcare, we find that the needs between the user, the end user of the solution, and IT can really differ quite substantially. The end user simply wants to be able to quickly access their apps. They want to be able to get to the point where they can start charting a patient and move on. We find in some healthcare facilities, if they go up to a workstation on wheels or a cart on wheels and it's not working, they'll push it into a closet and nobody knows about it. We had a CMIO in at VMware a few months ago, and he likened a clinical desktop to a hummingbird feeder. Again, the idea of very quickly accessing information, data, and moving on. And then if you go over to the IT side, they're faced with the same challenges as any other large enterprise organization. They need to be able to cost-effectively and efficiently manage their desktops and their applications. They have to deal with security and compliance concerns. These are actually getting tighter in this already regulated industry with the introduction of the new high-tech. Now you have to report a breach of 500 records or above and publish that on the Human Health Services website. We also see this real need to satisfy end users because, as you know, in healthcare, the doctors and the nurses are extremely vocal. But we find a lot of times, if they're not the decision maker in a clinical desktop solution, they're actually a heavy influencer. So it's really important that we help improve their workflow and make it easier to get to this information. And if we take a look at what the existing desktop environment is, we can see why it's so cumbersome, not only for the clinicians, but also for IT. So a lot of times there's applications installed on local devices. You have some applications being delivered over the network using either terminal services or Citrix. And you have some applications, a lot of time, web-based applications that need their own terminal because they can't coexist on the same desktop due to .NET or Java compatibility issues. So if you're the end user of the solution, if you're the clinician, a lot of times you have to find the right terminal, log into Windows, which can take anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes, find the right application, enter multiple passwords along the way, launch the application, just to get to the point where you can start to chart a patient. So it's extremely cumbersome, and what we see happening many times is that they just go back to writing things down on pen and paper and then batch entering it at the end of the day, which doesn't do anybody any good, because the real value from electronic medical records is the idea of about immediate collaboration. So we can help solve this issue. What we're seeing out in healthcare is it's really nobody's fault the way that clinical desktops have gotten to this state. And a lot of it has to do with the way that medical applications are acquired. Typically, they come from the ISV, the independent software vendor, preloaded on hardware and shipped to the customer, to the healthcare provider. And if the healthcare provider says, I need high availability, well, they'll double the amount of servers. Well, I need to do testing. Well, they'll have to double that amount of servers. I need to do development, add some more servers. Oh, and by the way, you're going to need either Citrix or terminal services to deliver this application. Add some more servers. And the reality is, the ISVs won't allow any other application to be installed on these server farms because that'll affect their SLA. So as a result, these healthcare providers have these huge siloed infrastructures on the back end that they have to maintain. And it's really not sustainable. It's not scalable, it's fragile, and it's prone to breakage. So we can start to help them break down these silos using virtualization. We can start virtualizing these servers on the back end using vSphere. And using ThinApp, our application virtualization product, we can start virtualizing these applications, isolating them, putting them in their own containers so that then you're able to run multiple ISV solutions on physical or virtual servers. And then we can start using virtualization to break down the components of a desktop. Because if you think about it, you have the operating system, the applications, and then persona, which is the user data and settings. So what we can do is using VMware View and ThinApp, we can start separating the operating system from the underlying device. That's machine virtualization, our core competency. Using ThinApp, we can separate those applications from the underlying operating system. But we can further separate out the user data and settings, and then move these into the data center, the internal private cloud, if you will, install them on different devices or different servers so that IT can manage them independently of each other. And this gives them a tremendous amount of agility because now they're able to patch the operating system without worrying about the application. They can roll out new applications without worrying about the operating system, all while keeping user data and setting persistent. And then when the end user goes to access their virtual desktop, VMware View and ThinApp will dynamically assemble these components back together again to present the end user with a single, unified, and, if you wish, a personalized version of their virtual desktop. So by moving to this managed service model, you're able to deliver this desktop to any type of qualified device within the healthcare facility. So this absolutely meets the needs of the provider because now you have a desktop being delivered as a managed service from the data center. It's always on. It's being managed by the people that are used to keeping the green light green. Now the desktop is tied to the end user's identity. So this allows them to go to any terminal, tap their card, swipe their fingerprint, get immediate access to their desktops and their applications. They're able to use multiple devices to get to their information because it's being hosted in the data center. It's a familiar interface. There's no retraining needed because we're virtualizing either XP or Windows 7 desktop, and everybody knows how to interact with that user interface. And now we're able to aggregate all of these applications onto a single desktop using ThinApp, so there's no more application compatibility issues. So now no longer do they have to find that one terminal that hosts that web-based application, because now you're able to provide it on a single framework. Now it also meets the needs of IT, because now they're able to centralize all of their data, their OSs, and information into the data center. Now you no longer have a security issue because you've moved that PHI from devices out on the healthcare floor, brought it into the data center where you can secure it, protect it, and manage the access to it. Now you have a complete audit trail of who accessed what, when, where, and for how long. And all this leads to lower costs. Now IT is able to manage a few servers versus hundreds or thousands of desktop endpoints. They're able to quickly provision desktops or upgrade applications at the server level. And of course, high availability. You'll see us this year really be advocates for this non-stop clinical desktop. VMware is the only vendor that's going to be able to provide this functionality. And a lot of it has to do with our underlying platform being vSphere. We're able to provide this very high level of service to these endpoints. Because with the introduction of electronic medical records, people are going to look at their desktop different. No longer is it going to be acceptable to get a blue screen of death in healthcare when you're totally dependent on digitized records. Now your desktop's going to become a tier 1 device, and it's absolutely critical that you provide 5 nines to the desktop. And what we're helping our customers do is really complete to build out this internal private cloud. A lot of our customers in healthcare have already understand the benefits of virtualizing servers, storage, and networking. And now you're able to add desktops and applications to this mix and manage everything with a common tool set and start delivering healthcare information technology as a service from the data center. So where do you start? Well, what we see happening a lot is that our customers typically start with application virtualization. They use this as a bridging from the physical to the virtual. ThinApp doesn't require any additional infrastructure. There's no client involved. You can start virtualizing your applications, running them from a shared network drive, and easily deliver those either into your Citrix server farm or to existing physical desktops. But then where the most benefits come, of course, is from virtualizing the complete desktop framework, because this is what's going to allow you to get that information off those endpoint devices, standardize your image, and provide this extreme high level of availability to your desktop. And that's it. So does anybody have any questions? No? Okay, well, thank you very much for your time today.